I never thought my life would take such a drastic turn. My name is Jack, and I was married to Samantha for 5 years. We had always shared a dream of building something meaningful together. While I was busy pioneering 3D printed affordable housing, something I was deeply passionate about, Sam was my rock, or at least I thought she was. I was putting in long hours at the lab, trying to perfect my designs, and she supported me through it all, or so I believed. Things started to change. In the beginning, it was subtle. Sam used to text me throughout the day with updates about her work as a marketing executive, but those messages dwindled. When I would come home, she'd often be glued to her phone, scrolling through social media or texting someone in an urgent tone. I tried to brush it off as work stress, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I vividly remember the night it hit me. I was exhausted from a grueling week and decided to surprise her with dinner. I pulled into our driveway, heart full of love, only to find her car parked next to mine with the headlights on. I thought maybe she was just working late, but as I opened the door, I caught a glimpse of her sitting on the couch, looking a bit too casual. The TV was on, but there was no food cooking. The moment felt strange. I made my way into the kitchen and saw an unopened bottle of wine on the counter. It was one of our favorites, yet I hadn't planned for it. "Hey, babe, I'm home." I called out, trying to push away the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Sam looked up, startled, and quickly tucked her phone away. "Hey, Jack, you're early," she said, her voice slightly higher than usual. I shrugged it off and set about making dinner. As I cooked, I noticed the odd tension in the air. Sam was unusually quiet, and every time I glanced her way, she was staring at her phone. Finally, as I plated the food, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Everything okay? You seem distracted." She forced a smile, but I could see right through it. "Oh, just work stuff, you know how it is." But I didn't know how it was. I had put everything into my work to create a better future for us, while she seemed increasingly distant. It was frustrating. That nagging feeling morphed into annoying suspicion. I brushed off my instincts for weeks, but they lingered like a shadow in our home. A couple of days later, while I was putting some files away, I found a receipt wedged between the papers. It was from a fancy restaurant and dated only a week before. The total was over $200. I felt my heart drop as I scanned the names of the dishes. They didn't seem like anything I would order, and we hadn't gone out to dinner in months. I confronted her about it that evening. "Sam, can we talk?" I asked cautiously. "Sure, what's up?" she replied, looking up from her phone again. I handed her the receipt without saying a word. Her face went pale as she quickly glanced at it. "Oh, that's just a work thing. I went out with some coworkers," she stammered, her eyes darting away from mine. "Really? Because I've never heard of anyone from your team going to that place with you." I shot back, my voice rising. She shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't think it mattered, it was just a casual dinner." But I knew better. There was a tone in her voice, a defensive edge that told me she was lying. My heart raced as I connected the dots, and I felt a surge of anger mixed with despair. "Is there someone else, Sam?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her eyes flitting back to her phone screen. It was as if she was searching for a way out, a plausible excuse that would somehow absolve her. "Of course not, Jack. Why would you even think that?" she replied, the bitchy edge returning to her tone, but I could see the cracks forming in her facade. In that moment, I realized I was ready to dig deeper. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it would be. The seed of suspicion had been planted, and it was only the beginning of a tumultuous journey into betrayal, heartache, and ultimately, revenge. The days following that confrontation felt like a ticking time bomb. My heart was heavy with suspicion, and each time I watched Sam swipe through her phone, I felt a prickle of anger mixed with dread. I wanted to believe that the woman I loved would never betray me, but the evidence was piling up. I decided to dig deeper. I began by paying attention to her routine. Sam would often leave for work meetings that stretched well into the night. I found it hard to swallow that she was working late hours while I was burning the midnight oil in my 3D printing lab. I started to keep track of her whereabouts. I had no idea how far I'd go to uncover the truth, but I was willing to take that leap. One evening, I decided to follow her. I waited until she left the house, the sound of her car engine fading into the distance. My heart pounded in my chest as I slid into my own car, all the while grappling with the weight of what I was doing. This felt wrong. I was invading her privacy, but I convinced myself it was the only way to know for sure. I followed her to a cozy bistro on the edge of town. From my spot in the parking lot, I could see her through the large windows. She was sitting across from a man I'd never seen before, and they were laughing. I could hardly breathe as I strained to see their conversation, my anger mounting with every smile exchanged between them. Suddenly, she leaned in closer, and I could see her hand resting on the man's arm. That small gesture lit a fire within me, one I couldn't ignore. In that moment, I knew she was lying. It wasn't just a casual dinner with a coworker. This was something much more insidious. I didn't stick around to see more. I drove home, my mind racing with rage and betrayal. I felt like a storm was brewing inside me, swirling with emotions I hadn't fully processed. How could she do this to me? I had sacrificed so much for us, pouring my heart and soul into my work, and here she was out with someone else. That night, I barely slept. Thoughts of revenge danced in my head, and while I knew I shouldn't, I became obsessed with the idea of exposing her betrayal. I needed to confront her again, but this time I wanted to have the upper hand. I could. Let her twist the story. I wanted her to know I wasn't the fool she thought I was. The next day, I started gathering evidence. I went through her social media, looking for any sign of infidelity. I found countless photos of her with friends, but there were also suspiciously timed posts that made me question her loyalty. I scrolled through her messages, an act that felt invasive but necessary. I discovered a thread with the man I saw her with, their flirtation bubbling just beneath the surface. There were heart emojis, inside jokes, and suggestive comments that left little to the imagination. I felt sick. My head was spinning and my stomach twisted in knots. I had been so blind to the signs, but now they were glaringly obvious. I couldn't believe I had shared my life, my dreams, and my future with someone who would betray me in such an intimate way. That evening, I confronted her again. I set the stage, knowing I had the evidence to back me up this time. "Sam, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of rage. She looked up from her phone, her expression unreadable. "Can it wait? I'm really busy." "No, it can't, not this time," I snapped. "I know about the guy you've been seeing." Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she regained her composure. "What are you talking about? I'm not seeing anyone." "Really, because I have the messages right here." I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling slightly. I displayed the evidence of her indiscretion, watching her face as her bravado crumbled. She stumbled over her words. "Jack, it's not what it looks like. I swear it's just harmless flirting. You know how I am. I didn't mean anything by it." "Harmless flirting," I echoed, my voice rising. "You're out with this guy and you think it's harmless. You're lying to me, Sam. You think I'm stupid." She opened her mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. I could see the guilt washing over her like a tidal wave. She knew she had been caught, and for the first time there was no way out. I felt a surge of satisfaction, but it was quickly drowned out by betrayal. The anger inside me burned hotter as I watched her try to piece together a defense that would never work. I realized that this wasn't just about proving her wrong, it was about reclaiming my own dignity. As the confrontation dragged on, her excuses fell flat. I saw the woman I once loved transform into someone I barely recognized, and it ripped my heart apart. But I knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning of my journey into revenge, and I would not let her get away with it. In the aftermath of that explosive confrontation, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, betrayal, and a sense of relief all tangled together in my chest. I had finally confronted Samantha about her infidelity, and though it didn't change the reality of what she had done, it felt like I had regained some control. But control was a double-edged sword. I was now faced with the question of what to do next. My initial impulse was to pack my bags and walk out the door. But I was also keenly aware of the complexity of our lives together. We had built a home and a life, and I had poured my heart and soul into my work. The thought of throwing it all away in a moment of anger felt reckless. Instead, I decided to devise a plan, a way to confront her not just emotionally, but strategically. I began by documenting everything. I took screenshots of the messages I had uncovered, noting the dates and times. I wanted to paint a clear and indisputable picture of her betrayal, not just for myself but for her too. I wanted her to understand the depth of her actions and, more importantly, feel the consequences. I wasn't going to shy away from the truth any longer. If she thought she could hide behind her lies, she was sorely mistaken. In the days that followed, I found myself coming up with a plan that felt almost like an architect sketching out a blueprint. I was going to build something new, but this time it would be founded on transparency. I wanted her to experience the weight of her deception, to see how it felt to have the ground pulled out from under her, much like what I had experienced when I discovered her betrayal. I began leaking bits of information to her. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about our relationship," I'd say casually over dinner. "It's funny how trust is the foundation of everything." I watched her squirm at the mention of trust, but I kept it vague enough to keep her on edge. The uncertainty gnawed at her, and I could tell she was trying to anticipate my next move. One evening, I invited a few friends over for drinks. I wanted to create an environment where Sam would feel comfortable but also exposed. I knew she loved social gatherings, and it was the perfect opportunity to gather some intel. As the night wore on, I casually dropped hints about the state of relationships in my life and how important honesty was to me. Each comment was designed to sow doubt in her mind and make her question whether the truth would come out. As expected, she was uneasy. I could see her glancing at me, her mind racing as she tried to comprehend what I was doing. It was a game of psychological chess, and I was determined to win. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, not just in my eyes but in front of our friends too. Later that week, the culmination of my plan unfolded. I decided to throw a small gathering at our house, inviting a few mutual friends who were close to both of us. I wanted to create an atmosphere of camaraderie, but I also wanted to plant the seed of doubt in Sam's mind. I had no intention of making a public scene, but I wanted her to feel the heat bearing down on her, to recognize that everyone could see through her facade. That night, I prepared a small speech. Nothing too overt, just enough to make her feel uncomfortable. As friends mingled, I raised my glass and said, "To trust and honesty, they're the foundations of any strong relationship." I emphasized the words trust and foundations in a way that made everyone turn to look at Samantha. Her face paled, and I could see her trying to mask her panic. "Cheers," they all echoed, raising their glasses. Sam's smile was shaky, and I could see her trying to play it cool, but the cracks were forming. The tension in the room was palpable, and I relished every moment of it. After everyone had left, the confrontation reached its peak. I could feel her seething, and the moment we were alone, she exploded. "What was that all about, Jack? Why did you have to make it weird?" "Weird? Is that what you call it when someone's been cheating?" I shot back, my voice steady. "Stop twisting this around. I told you it was nothing," she spat, but I wasn't having it anymore. "No, Sam, you've been lying to my face. It's time for you to admit what you've done," I replied, feeling the fire in my gut. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she pleaded. "You were so busy with your work and I felt neglected. It didn't mean anything." Her words cut like a knife, and I felt a rush of rage. "So your solution was to sleep with someone else. You thought that was acceptable." "I was lonely. You have no idea how isolating it's been," she exclaimed, a mixture of anger and desperation in her voice. "Lonely? So you decided to betray the person who sacrificed everything for us. You think that's an excuse?" I felt my heart racing, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. As we battled back and forth, I began to realize that there was no point in trying to find common ground anymore. This was about her reckoning. I had uncovered the truth, and it was time to make her confront the reality of her choices. I was done being the victim. I was ready to take the reins and shape the narrative from here on out. That night was just a prelude to what was to come, but I felt a sense of empowerment starting to bloom. My path was clear. I would not allow her to walk away unscathed. The foundation of our relationship had been shattered, and now it was time for her to see what it felt like to have her own ground pulled out from under her. I was building my own structure, one where transparency and trust reigned supreme, and I was determined to see it through. As the days turned into weeks, I could feel a shift in the atmosphere of our home. The tension hung thick in the air, and every conversation felt like walking on eggshells. Samantha was on the defensive, constantly trying to rationalize her actions, but I had mentally checked out of the relationship. My mind was focused on my revenge, and I was starting to enjoy the game I was playing. I decided to take a more calculated approach. I knew Samantha had a penchant for social media, and I was going to use that to my advantage. The world saw her as the charming, successful woman who had it all together, but I had the key to unlock her facade. I started to draft a series of posts that would reveal her true colors, but I wasn't ready to hit post just yet. I wanted to gather enough evidence and create a narrative that would expose her for what she truly was. I began by subtly reaching out to her friends, the ones I knew would be supportive of her. I didn't want to come off as the jilted husband just throwing accusations around. I wanted to appear as the concerned partner who was genuinely worried about the state of our relationship. I would casually mention my suspicions, framing it in a way that would spark their curiosity. "Have you noticed anything strange about Sam lately?" I'd start, my tone light but laced with concern. "She seems different, cold." Maybe. Their responses varied, but they all shared a similar sentiment, that they hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. That only fueled my resolve. If they didn't see it, then I would make them see it. I started compiling stories, snippets of conversations that I had with people who had crossed paths with her recently. I was building a network that would ultimately become a web of connections, leading to the truth of her infidelity. One of her closest friends, Megan, promised to keep an eye on things. I knew Megan had a knack for gossip, and I'd planted seeds in her mind that would grow into something substantial. She was the kind of person who could amplify a story. I needed her on my side, and she was more than willing to oblige. "Jack, I'll be sure to keep you posted if I see anything weird," she assured me, her eyes twinkling with mischief. That was exactly what I needed. With Megan in the loop, I felt I was building an audience for Samantha's downfall. The anticipation of what would happen next fueled me. I was no longer the victim. I felt empowered, like I was orchestrating a performance where I would unveil the truth at just the right moment. As the days passed, I continued with my daily routine, balancing my work on the 3D printing project while keeping a close watch on Sam. I had become adept at reading her moods, noting her reaction to the smallest things. If I was in the same room as her, I would observe how she would fidget when she got a notification on her phone, or how her demeanor would shift when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I remember one particular afternoon when she received a text while we were eating lunch together. Her face lit up, and a smile broke through her usual tension. It made my blood boil to see her react so positively to someone outside our marriage, and I made a mental note to confront her later about it. But I was strategic about it. Instead of showing my cards, I opted for a more subtle approach. I casually asked, "Who was that? You looked happy." "Oh, just a coworker asking about a project," she deflected, but I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes. "Just a coworker, huh? Seems like you've got a lot of work projects going on these days," I replied, my voice laced with sarcasm. "Jack, please," she sighed, rolling her eyes. "You're being ridiculous." It was moments like this that reminded me why I was doing what I was doing. The layers of deceit were still palpable, and every interaction only solidified my determination. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, and I wanted the world to see her for what she truly was, the person who had betrayed not just me, but also the trust we had built together. I decided to set the stage for my grand reveal. I organized a casual gathering with our friends, ensuring that Megan would be there. I wanted to create a comfortable setting where I could drop the truth bomb without it feeling like an ambush. The plan was to let the conversation flow naturally, allowing it to build to a point where I could interject with my carefully crafted narrative. On the night of the gathering, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had invited a few close friends, making sure to create a laid-back environment. We all sat around, sipping wine and sharing laughter, and I could see Samantha trying to play the perfect host, but her eyes would occasionally dart toward me, a hint of apprehension lurking beneath her cheerful facade. As the night progressed, I saw my opportunity. I raised a glass and began to talk about trust and honesty in relationships, framing it in a way that made it sound like a casual reflection. You know, it's funny how one slip can unravel everything, I said, letting the words hang in the air. Samantha's smile faltered, and I could see her heart race as she tried to maintain her composure. I continued, it's all about being transparent. I mean, if you're not honest with the ones you love, what do you really have? Megan caught on to the vibe in the room, and I could see her leaning in, eager for the revelation. I was orchestrating a symphony, and I was about to hit the crescendo. Speaking of which, I said, leaning back in my chair, I found something interesting recently. It seems that sometimes our partners have secrets they think we'll never uncover. The room went silent, and all eyes turned toward me. Samantha's expression was a mix of panic and anger. I wasn't going to let her escape this one. I've seen some messages from a certain coworker, Sam, I said, my tone calm but heavy with implication. Messages that make it pretty clear you've been stepping out on our marriage. Gasps filled the room. Megan looked horrified, and I watched as Samantha's face fell. The air was thick with tension, and I felt exhilarated, knowing I was finally exposing her for what she truly was. As I awaited her reaction, I realized I had reached the point of no return. I was ready for whatever came next, knowing I had built the foundation of my revenge on the truth. Finally, the time had come for Samantha to face the consequences of her betrayal, and I was prepared to watch it all unfold. The silence that followed my revelation was almost deafening. Samantha's face twisted in confusion and anger, her carefully maintained composure shattered. The room was filled with a tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. I could see her mind racing, trying to formulate a response, but the words seemed to escape her. Jack, you've got it all wrong. She finally managed, her voice shaky but defiant. You're just trying to make me look bad in front of everyone. This isn't the time or place for this. Oh, I think it is exactly the right time and place, I retorted, the adrenaline coursing through me. You've made a mockery of our marriage, and it's about time everyone knows the truth. Megan's eyes darted between us, her shock palpable. Sam, is this true? She asked, her voice low and careful. I could see the betrayal wash over her face as she began to put the pieces together. Samantha opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She was cornered, and the reality of the situation was crashing down around her. I didn't mean for it to happen, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I was lonely, Jack. You were always working, and I felt abandoned. Lonely, so you thought cheating was the solution. I shot back, disgust coursing through me. You had other options, Sam. You could have talked to me. You could have been honest. I didn't think you'd understand. She cried, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't want to hurt you. Too late for that, I replied coldly. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on both of us. The friends who had gathered to enjoy a casual evening were now witnesses to a heartbreaking revelation, and I didn't care. I wanted Sam to feel exposed, raw, and vulnerable. The room was thick with tension, and I could see Megan's expression shift from shock to sympathy. He had been close enough to us to know the dynamic of our relationship, and now she was caught in the crossfire. Sam, you really need to take responsibility for this, she said softly, her gaze steady. Samantha's head dropped, and I could see the realization settle in. I messed up, she whispered. I never wanted it to end like this. I thought I could fix things. By lying, I interjected, my anger flaring up again. You thought cheating was going to fix anything. You've broken the trust we built. She looked around the room, her eyes pleading for understanding, but I knew there was no way out of this for her. I thought it was just a phase, she said, her voice trembling. I thought I could handle it without hurting you. I shook my head, disbelief flooding through me. Handle it? You've shattered me, Sam. You've made a fool of me in front of our friends. You've lost everything we built together. As I spoke, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. I was finally reclaiming my narrative, standing firm against the woman who had betrayed me. The emotional toll was heavy, but I was resolute. I wouldn't let her lie her way out of this. Turning to our friends, I continued. I didn't want to drag everyone into this, but I felt like I had no choice. This is what happens when trust is broken. This is the real consequence of betrayal. The realization hung in the air like fog. I could see some of our friends shifting uncomfortably, unsure of how to react. I glanced at Megan, who looked as though she was grappling with her own feelings of betrayal. Samantha finally looked up, her face streaked with tears. "I'm so sorry, Jack. I didn't think it would go this far." "That's the problem, isn't it?" I replied, my voice firm. "You didn't think at all, and now you have to face the reality of your choices." With that, I turned away from her, stepping outside onto the porch to catch my breath. I needed a moment to process the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. The cool night air felt refreshing against my flushed skin, and I closed my eyes, drawing in a deep breath. As I stood alone, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. I had finally confronted the truth, but at what cost? The love I had for Samantha was still buried deep inside, but it was tainted now, tainted by her betrayal. I realized I had to make a choice. This was about more than just getting revenge. It was about deciding what I wanted for my future. After a few moments of solitude, I felt a presence beside me. It was Megan, her expression softened. "Jack, I can't believe this is happening. I'm so sorry you're going through this." "Thanks, Megan. It's a lot to process. I can't believe Sam would do this," she continued, her voice low. "She's always seemed so happy. You both seemed so in love." "Yeah, well, sometimes appearances can be deceiving," I replied, taking another deep breath. "But now I have to think about what's next for me. I can't keep going on like this." Megan nodded, her eyes compassionate. "You deserve to be happy, Jack. Don't let this define who you are." I appreciated her support more than I could express, but I also knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. I needed time to think, to process the heartbreak, and to decide what I wanted moving forward. As we stood in silence, I felt the weight of my decision settling on my shoulders. I couldn't go back to the way things were. I had to confront the reality of what had happened, and I had to be the one to decide how to move forward, whether that meant trying to salvage the pieces of our marriage or walking away from it completely. The truth had been revealed, and now it was time for me to find my own path, one that would lead me away from betrayal and toward a future built on trust and authenticity. The journey would be difficult, but I was determined to find my way, no matter how long it took. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions, and I found myself drifting through life in a haze. I had confronted Samantha, and while I felt a sense of victory in exposing her betrayal, I was also left with an overwhelming sadness. The love I had for her was still there, but it was marred by the realization that the woman I thought I knew was gone. She had chosen deceit over honesty, and that was a wound that would take time to heal. After the confrontation, Samantha and I had a few tense conversations. She was desperate to apologize, to make amends, but I wasn't ready to hear it. I needed space to think, to process what had happened. Each time we talked, I could see the guilt etched on her face, the regret in her eyes. But regret wasn't enough. It wouldn't erase what she had done. I took the time to reflect on my life, my work, and what I wanted for the future. I realized that while I loved the work I was doing in 3D printed housing, I had poured so much of myself into it that I had neglected my own happiness. I had sacrificed my emotional needs for the sake of our relationship, and it had led me down this painful path. With each passing day, the fog began to lift. I started to regain clarity, and I made the decision to focus on myself. I would no longer be defined by my relationship with Samantha or her betrayal. I began to throw myself into my work even more, channeling my pain into my passion for creating affordable housing, structures that would stand on foundations of transparency, just as I sought to rebuild my own life. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself slowly healing. I leaned on my friends for support, and they rallied around me, reminding me that I was worthy of love and respect. Megan, in particular, became a close confidant, offering a listening ear and a steady presence. She helped me to process my feelings, and I appreciated her honesty. "You deserve someone who will cherish you, Jack," she would say. "Don't settle for anything less." Samantha attempted to reach out, sending texts filled with apologies and pleas for another chance. I read her messages but didn't respond. I needed to prioritize my own mental health and decide what was best for me. I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were, and I wasn't ready to forgive her just yet. Eventually, I found the strength to meet with her one last time. I agreed to a coffee date at a small cafe, fully aware that this would be a final reckoning. As I sat across from her, I could see the sadness etched on her face, and a part of me ached for the woman I had fallen in love with. But I also felt a fierce resolve. I wouldn't let nostalgia cloud my judgment. "Jack," she began, her voice trembling, "I know I messed up. I can't express how sorry I am for what I did. I never meant to hurt you." "I know you're sorry, Sam," I replied, my voice steady. "But sorry isn't enough anymore. You made a choice that changed everything between us." Tears filled her eyes, and I could see the weight of her regret pressing down on her. "I was stupid and selfish. I thought I could handle everything on my own. I never wanted to lose you. But you did lose me," I said softly, my heart aching but my resolve unwavering. "What we had is gone. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and you broke that trust beyond repair." Her shoulders slumped, and I could see the acceptance wash over her. "I don't blame you for feeling this way. I've destroyed everything we built, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I wish I could take it back." "I know you do," I replied, my voice calm. "But life doesn't offer do-overs. We both have to move forward, and that means we have to let go of what's broken." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our conversation hanging heavy in the air. I felt a sense of closure beginning to form. I was ready to walk away from the pain and reclaim my life. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Sam," I said finally, my heart heavy but determined. "But it won't be with me." As I stood up to leave, I felt a rush of emotions wash over me: sadness, relief, and a newfound sense of freedom. I walked out of the cafe, and with each step I felt the burden of betrayal begin to lift. I had faced the truth, and now it was time to embrace my own journey. In the months that followed, I focused on my work and my own personal growth. I made new connections, met new people, and even started dating again. It was a slow process, but I learned to open my heart without the weight of past pain dragging me down. I was building something new, laying down the foundations of my future on principles of honesty and trust. Looking back, I realized that Samantha's betrayal, though devastating, had also served as a catalyst for my own transformation. It forced me to confront myself and my priorities, and in doing so, I discovered a renewed sense of purpose. As I moved forward, I made a promise to myself. I would never again let someone else's choices dictate my happiness. I was in control of my own narrative, and I was determined to write a story filled with honesty, integrity, and a fresh start. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it, one step at a time.